2 p.m. Central African time. Welcome to Market View. This is the first edition of the week. Thank you so much for joining us. We are going to have ourselves a very good and very informative show coming up on the program today. Over 5 billion emalangeni in assets and 3 billion emalangeni in savings. Eswatini's cooperatives are not just supporting livelihoods, but they are anchoring the economy. And today, the Kingdom plays host to a landmark moment, its first ever international conference on sustainability through cooperatives, drawing delegates from 6 African nations. In fact, it goes up to 9. The theme, Sustainable Youth Engagement in Cooperatives, Experiences in Africa, South of the Sahara. It is a bold call to action, positioning youth cooperatives not just as community projects, but as engines of economic renewal and innovation. We will be joined by Bongiwe Xaba. She's the chairperson of the conference organizing committee to break down why this conference matters and what signals for Eswatini's economic future. That and more. Of course, we do have our business news to start the program, so let's get into that. We get into our first story. There are 26 registered youth cooperative societies in the Kingdom of Eswatini, and the Minister for Commerce, Industry and Trade, Honorable Manqoba Khumalo, says it is time for them to level up. Speaking at the first international conference on sustainability through cooperatives that was held at Codec in Eswatini, the minister urged young people to produce goods and services that can compete not just locally, but regionally and internationally.
In Eswatini, we recognize the vital role cooperatives play in our economy, particularly through agricultural production, as well as providing access to credit, finance, and financial services to all their members. Our ministry, through the Department of Cooperatives, ably led by our Commissioner, Mr. Khumalo, is committed to facilitating economic growth through cooperative action and promoting sustainable management of cooperatives enterprises. We are particularly encouraged by the growing participation of the youth in the cooperative sector in Eswatini. Currently, Eswatini has 26 registered youth cooperatives, societies, and we are actively encouraging these societies to produce goods and services that can compete not only in local markets, but in regional markets as well as international markets.
Leaders in the cooperative sector from other countries share how cooperatives can thrive and be sustainable.
And the sustainability here means that they have to, first of all, have enough membership. That means you have to be able to mobilize young people to be in cooperative so that they can have enough shares. They have also to be able to produce, to be able to generate products that really fits the needs of the young people. Because young people have their own kind of tastes. They need, if you, for example, if it is a savings and a credit cooperative society, then you should be able to provide them, okay, maybe small credit, so that they can start their small businesses, they can manage their life. That is one. But again, they have to be able to follow. They have to be able to follow the law of the country, because if you are dealing with financial issues, obviously you have to make sure that we follow financial procedures.
We need to foremost diversify. We need to diversify the cooperatives, the cooperative business, in terms of we should not look, or we should not continue to focus on a cooperative enterprise as an institution that is only dealing with agriculture and saving and credit activities. We've seen young men and women in other parts of the world, they are being exploiting other opportunities, other avenues, and they are excelling well. They are investing in sustainable energy, they're investing in water resources, they're investing in forestry. These are the things which are now telling that, okay, the direction should not be the traditional business as we used to know.
The youth from different cooperatives say the conference came at an opportune time.
I want to learn how we get sustainability as the youth cooperatives, because you find that as we are running our businesses in the country, some of the avenues would be via the cooperatives movement. So it's actually to understand the dynamics and the way we handle the challenges we face as the youth cooperatives.
I'm hoping to gain more insights on how cooperatives run, and as a member of a cooperative movement for young people, I'm hoping to get other skills so that young people can be interested in upholding the cooperative principles, and also that we should learn other ways to impact our economies through sustaining cooperatives.
I believe for youth corps to be very resilient is to have the cooperative identity, because I noticed that we want to copy the old model. We don't want to be as fashionable as we think youth are. We need to be very dynamic.
Cooperative society in the country have assets worth about 5 billion emalangeni and savings standing at 3 billion emalangeni. According to the Ministry of Commerce, Industry and Trade, current records which are being updated show that the industry employs over 1,245 workers with 500 permanent positions. For Market View, Nelson Dlangamandla, Vuminkosi Nzinisa and Derek Msibi, Ezulwini.
While the Minister for Commerce, Industry and Trade, Honorable Manqoba Khumalo, recently announced that a Taiwanese industrial park at Eswatini will be built in Eswatini, bringing with it 10,000 jobs. But the question remains, when exactly can Eswatini expect to see the commencement of this project? And the Minister has now provided timelines for the start of construction, giving the nation a clearer picture of when the promised economic boost will begin to take shape.
Sente lama processes ahulumende ukuthi lenzawo sale si converted to a full industrial park. We process ke siliteko ka commerce lesisebenze nebaka housing. Bese ke kwesibili sifuna ukuqala ukuthi sibe ne pilot project khona sithemba ukuthi ke tathi cala 2026 yeqala inkampani leta upilota khona ibe sevele ikhona ngifike nje ngahlangana nayo le Taiwan bashwe ama plan abo njengoba sathi ke kuqala kwemsebenzi akusho ukuthi uvuka kusasa sokukhona kuba nema process lamaningi laba khona so thina nje sibheke ukuthi maqala 2026 kutabe lenzawo sevele i-designated kwekuthi industrial park sekwentwe konke lokudzingeka ukuthi siba support lokuhle ke ngalomsebenzi ukuthi uhulumende wase Taiwan uthi utawubabambisa labo bosomabhizinisi labafuna kuset up la kuze ukuthi bakhona kwakha lama factory abo lokusho ukuthi nalo kwakha lama factory ngeke kudzinge ukuthi kumele uhulumende ngoba kulabanye baye bacele uhulumende abakhele lama factory shells bese bona bayangena ukhanzisi ke kuyabambelela uma ngabe uhulumende asete imali ngaleso sikhathi but in this case bathi batawukhona ukuthi bathi developele lama factory abo lokusho ukuthi ke kwaqala le project sibheke ukuthi bese kuya accelerator in the next 2 to 3 years leyenzawo leyastayikhanza ukuthi indzawo vele leseyibhizi kakhulu ngemsebenzi.
Right, that is how we mark the end of our business news. Remember that first story around the International Conference on Sustainability for Cooperatives in the Kingdom of Eswatini. Yes, we're playing host. And after the break, we drill into the conversation on why it matters now and what it signals for Eswatini's economic future with the committee chairperson, Mongewe Xaba.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
Thank you for staying with us and welcome back. In the country, cooperatives have assets standing at 5 billion emalangeni and savings currently at around 3 billion emalangeni, making this sector critical in economic growth. And today, the country hosted its first ever international conference on sustainability through cooperatives at Codec, Eswatini, attended by 6 countries. The theme, Sustainable Youth Engagement in Cooperatives, Experiences in Africa south of the Sahara. And the message is clear. Youth cooperatives aren't just groups, but they are engines of change, driving job creation, they're driving innovation, as well as a stronger economy for the Kingdom of Eswatini. We are now joined by Bongiwe Xaba. She's the chairperson of the conference organizing committee, and she's going to unpack the importance of the conference. Bongiwe, a very good afternoon to you. Sikubusele sikwamukele ehlelweni. Kumsebenzi lo mukhulu kakhulu lona uma sibuka nje la mave la participate sibuka naleti letikhulunywako lana 5 billion, in fact excess of 5 billion and excess of around 3 billion emalangeni. Yeah, let nombolo angitipimbi. Ngiyafuna ukuthi sive sisaqala ngikhuluma yethu ukuthi ingabe moment lenje isho kuthini ngelive la kaNgwane. Ngichubeka ke embili.
Siyabonga Nxumalo. Ngibingelele like ushito njengoba ushito ukuthi lena I conference yekucala ukuthi siyibambe silikolish letelibanjiswano ezulwini nathi ingumlandvo ekuthenini singaletha abantu noma abantu labasha abatokukhuluma ngetindzaba tema cooperatives netinkinga labahlangabetana nato basafuna kungena kuma cooperatives ngoba like ushito ukuthi ema cooperatives ngona lokhanza ukuthi nawo ayafaka litshe esivivaneni emnothweni. So siteke abete labantu labasha from different countries sitokuxoxisana kuphuma nema solutions ukuthi ngikuphi lesingakwenda ukuthi bangene kuma cooperatives. Lucwaningo lolube khona ngaphambilini luvetile ukuthi ema cooperatives anebantu labadzala noma emalunga awo bantu lasebakhulile. So sifuna ke ukuthi lama cooperatives angafi nasebaphumile labantu labadzala noma seba retire sebahlele emakhaya kodwa achubeke ema cooperatives andlondlobale.
Yeah. Bengisathe kanje lenzaba yale mali. Lo 5 billion inzaba yema savings.
Yes.
Lo 3 billion siteka ema assets.
Yes.
Lokho kusinika sithombe sokuthi nangemambala ema cooperatives singasho ukuthi adlala inzima le matima kumnotho welive la kaNgwane umnotho nje welive vele empeleni. But ngeke sesibuke beyond that nombolo si ensureisha kanjani ukuthi lama structures lawa ayachubeka aba relevant kakhulu for naba bantu labasha lothi basese kuma margins masingabe ngesingisi.
Siyabonga kuvelile ukuthi bantu labasha sikhathi esiningi abahlali balalele umsakato. So bantu labasha kakhulu baku technology bayacwaninga noma bosongcondvo. So sithi kenyalo asesente lama cooperatives abe relevant to labantu labasha. Instead ukuthi mhlambe singabuka ukuthi kwakwendiwa njani phambilini kwakulinywa kanjani usesiyathinyalo kunema drones kunaleti tinto leti. So sithi let that be incorporated into the cooperatives kuto attractor labantu labasha for the sustainability of the societies.
Ngifuna sibuke lesicubulo Thiyane sikhulumisa kakhulu bona labantu labasha lesithi nyalo sebahleli kakhulu kunati tebuchwepheshe lathi ngolento ekuxhumana nabo AI sebakhona nyalo. Uma ngisibuka lesicubulo siteka indzaba yekukhonza kwale engagement lekhona ikhulumisa ukuthi kufuna kube nekuthelelana kwelwati kuthekelwana kwelwati experience sharing phinze kube ne real economic participation ukuthi kulomnotho nanabo asebadlale inzima babonakale. Ingabe ku view yakho ungathi ngasingathi ama barriers noma ke tihibe letikhona letisendleleni yabo bantu labasha ekuthenini nangemambala bayakhona lokuparticipate noma bane cooperative inclusion.
lesikubonile kuma cooperatives because lokhu konke lekukhuluma kusikubhayisa kucwaningo lelendiwe before. So lesikubonile ukuthi bani labasha nabangena kuma cooperatives lokufike bakhinya bede ukuthi bangayicala kahle le business ngoba I cooperative li business baqhubeke nalo badlondlobale baqhubeke vele baye phambili ukuthi bade kahle nathi imali tekulisungula lokhanza ukuthi ke ngesingisi singathi they become donor dependent kanzi I cooperative ithi lapha ungenela kutoti sita wena ufake yakho imali noma lo mfutho emandla lo afakako so sithi ke mhlawumbe ema cooperatives noma ngithi simbongile kakhulu uhulumende wakithi kaNgwane ukuthi avule RDF because siwabonile ema cooperatives abantu labasha aqalwa kodwa lokubese kuyasikhinyabeda ukuthi awakhonsi sifuna lokuthi lama cooperatives abantu labasha akhonse lokusho abantu labasha ngesingisi sithi they are nomadic kusasabala lapha ukhansi baqala lama business baqalela nje ukuthi kwanyalo ngithi umsebenzi kwanela kuchashwa uyashiya sekuyafakela ngemuva so mhlambe ingcina namba iqala lengikhulume ngayo ngilokuthi bede kahle le capital startup for lama business lokunye ukhanze ukuthi bade lolwati lokuthi yini yona le cooperative bangene lapha cooperative ngalokuthi babone nayo imali ukuthi yathi sawuthola imali lengaka but the governance part yokuphathwa kwale cooperative bade kona so sesiwabona ke ama cooperatives ayafa
emave la khona kulomsebenzi lamuhla abalelwa kulendlula kulasithupha ke kula imfica that's the 6 to 9 countries onke aqhamuka singathi mabom vekadini leAfrica mathuba lafana nalawa ke ayafuna lo ukuthi bese sithi siyathatha ema models nama innovations la banawo lahlakaniphile siyawa implementa nathi ngalapha ekhaya ngabe nisaxoxisana lapha ngumaphi nibona ngathi maba presenter cha lana ke singakuthatha lokho siku apply la khaya kusiside
siyabonga kakhulu Nxumalo noma singakafika egcineni kwalomhlangano kulanga lekucala kodwa nje ngalokuthi bengibuka lamaphepha kungena kwawo lecwaningo labalendako siyabona ukuthi kunengi lesingakucosha singemaswati because labanye nje bato bakhuluma tindzaba tayo the social media ukuthi how can it play a role in ensuring that youth is included kuma cooperatives labanye babuka ukuthi ngoba ema cooperatives awasiwo la khonsako lawo abantu labasha ingaba khona yini kukhuliswa lesithi mentoring kukhuliswa kwalabantwana or the incubation process ukuthi can they be incubated while still at college level yes and also labanye bakhuluma ndzaba ukuthi yona le cooperative ingafakwa yini the business model part ifakwe from ma primary schools akhule vele lo mntwana athi ukuthi kunendvo lenje siyakhona kuwonga siyakhona kubolekisa siyakhona kusebenta sindzawonye kulesithi kuhlangana the association of people baphathwa kanjani ndibantu yes
ngcenye nje sesephetha sikhathi sethu sesilimele ngiyabona nje producer ungiphali ngeminute masibuke ama outcomes nangilomsebenzi sesithi sewuyephetha yini nje leningathi nine isignala isuccess kulomsebenzi wenu ngiyathatha na ukukhuluma ukuthi kunenzaba daba policy change engcele ukutafuna ukuthi kube khona kune attitude change lokufuna ibe khona kubantu labasha nje kucabanga kwabo indaba bacabanga ngayo is it new funding opportunities what is it really for you that would define success makuphela lomsebenzi
lokuta what would define success ukuthi sibe nawo lama scholars labantu labatawucwaninga because lucwaningo Nxumalo luveta as you research you come up with the findings then from the findings that's where we base our policies that's where we base the practices that okuchubeka ama cooperatives so thina nje sil college sibheke ukuthi emva kwale kwe conference sizohlala phansi sende naye incwadi sijabula kakhulu sitholele usido kwekwakha incwadi letawufaka konke lokwentiwako such that sikufake la etindzabeni tekuchumana mhlambe kubo social media nakuphi la kuto assesswa khona abantu labasha lokutawuthi ke leli college nalo kulibeke ezingeni thide kwekuthi liyakhona kucwaninga lichamuke nema-solutions lapha nalapha.
Thiyane simakhulu isikhathi sakho lomuhla emini sethemba umsebenzi awuchubeka uhambe ube yi-success. International Cooperatives Conference, why it matters. Uteka yona ke indzaba uthi research will inform practices and legislation going forward, and indeed the youth that is at the margins right now will be brought in for inclusion and therefore success. Sibahlola emakethe sinasanele sibiya lo ngusomnotho wethu sitawubuka emakethe.
Eswatini TV has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Eswatini Communications Commission. We are committed to reporting news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that does not amount to hate speech or the description of gratuitous violence or explicit sex. For any complaints of our programming, please contact us on 2411-9600 or email info@eswatinitv.co.za. You can also contact the Eswatini Communications Commission on 2406-7000 or write a letter to ECCOM on PO Box 7811 Mbabane. Email address is info@ecom.org.sz.
Welcome back. It's 22 minutes after 2. You're still watching Market View. This is our market analysis segment. It is indeed the last segment of our show. We have Sanel Sbia virtually. He's our economist, and we are looking at what the numbers in the markets are telling us today. Per usual, we'll start with Wall Street. What is happening in the United States? There's been a lot of commotion in Trump's administration. There's been a lot of significant developments within the artificial intelligence sector, the tech center. We know that NVIDIA is big there. So let's be, if we look at the numbers today, what is it that is really driving this rally that we are seeing here?
Thank you, Mr. Ngumalo. So when you look at the numbers, Mr. Ngumalo, they are quite telling of a couple of things that are happening both within the politics and the geopolitics and the economy, just standing there to spectate and see how that plays out. So if you go into the US, if you look at those numbers, those were the Friday numbers showing that pullback due to that escalation between Iran and Israel. So we're seeing Iran and Israel exchanging missiles, and I mean, it has gotten quite volatile into a point where even 4 days into that conflict, we are not seeing any signs of pullback or any signs of resolution. But we are hopeful that with what is going, with what's happening in, with what's happening right there in the US, you know, with that G7 summit ongoing, we do hope that there will be a bit of a concrete output coming out of that meeting in relation to the Russia-Iran war. So right now, what markets are fearing, Mr. Ngumalo, is the fact that that Iran has been drawn into the war. And remember that Israel is also now continuing its onslaught on Gaza, on that Gaza Strip. So right now we have Israel fighting wars on a couple of fronts, and the fear there, Mr. Ngumalo, is the fact that we know that Iran usually fought through proxies in Yemen and in neighboring countries. So right now what we fear is that escalation might actually draw the entire region into complete disrepute, and that'll have an impact on the price of oil overall, since the Middle East is one of the major oil producing regions across the globe. So we're looking at that, Mr. Ngumalo, and we are also watching out to see how the central banks of the world are going to play this out this week, because we know that the Federal Reserve Bank is meeting this week, week. The Bank of London is meeting this week. So we want to see how they're going to factor that in because that might just probably bring back some inflation fears into the markets. So we are hoping to see how that plays out, and markets are actually eagerly watching to see how that's going to play out, Mr. Nxumalo. So when you move across the pond, we move into London, into the US, into the UK, and into the UK and the greater Eurozone. Again, we're seeing a bit of a rebound there, Mr. Nxumalo, following Friday's sell-off due to that Israel-Iran war. But right now, the fact that that war is not trickling out through the entire region so far has somehow reined in those fears in terms of the price of Brent crude oil. So we've seen it coming down, and markets are somehow steadily watching what's going to happen there. With London maintaining that 8,800 mark, with Frankfurt maintaining that 23,000 mark, and the French still on that 7,000 mark in terms of overall trade volumes. And then again, when we move into Asia, it's still an issue of those geopolitical tensions, Mr. Nxumalo, and over and above, remember that these geopolitics come on top of the looming July 9 deadline, where we expect countries to have actually signed their deals. So what we're seeing right now is markets are somehow phasing out that geopolitical risk, at least in the short term. But we've had, news coming out of Tehran that if the US does not pull back Israel, they are going to start attacking those US installations within the Middle East. And, we are also fearing the fact that they might start going for those trade routes. So there's a lot of uncertainty right now. And the last thing we need is President yet another spanner into the works in terms of those trade talks. So we do hope that we're going to see some positive outcomes coming through from those trade talks. But Asia again has recouped those losses that we saw last week Friday, and it's just standing back to those averages that we saw before the start of the war. With the Nikkei there gaining some 477 points to stay on the 3,000 mark. And then in Johannesburg, we know that it's Youth Day, so it's a public holiday. There aren't any activities ongoing there. Coming into the Eswatini Stock Exchange, again, there hasn't been any movement within the Eswatini Stock Exchange. We're staying at the very same level, given that Eswatini is mostly what you'd call your dividend investor destination. And I think probably the risks that are inherent in those geopolitical fronts are still seen to be very far off from hitting Eswatini. And then when you go into your commodities, what you see there, Mr. Nxumalo, is gold is back on that 3,400 mark, even though we're seeing some marginal losses today. But what this signals, Mr. Nxumalo, is we've gone into yet another hedging market because what this means now is people are looking for, safe havens. That's your gold, those minerals that are going to hold value, because we don't know the volatility that will come with this Iran-Israel war. So we're seeing gold on that 3,400 mark, and Brent crude, Mr. Nxumalo, earlier in the day, it did reach $79 per barrel. That Middle East instability really is causing the future price of Brent crude oil to really just climb up, and that's where the uncertainty is coming from in the markets. We're seeing inflation fears coming back into the markets because the price of Brent crude is on that level. Remember, we moved just from 63, 64 average last week. In just a space of 5 days, we're now sitting on 73 at present, but we've been to that 79, 80, quite close to the 80 mark, Mr. Nxumalo. So that's why we're saying it's quite interesting how the central banks are going to handle this, and we are waiting to see how they handle this, more especially the Feds in the US, and also what the European Central Bank is going to do, because that's largely what the rest of the world follows. And then in terms of the currencies, we remain on that 17 mark, but losing some marginal ground, because as you're seeing these wars, Mr. Nxumalo, coming up to play, what you see usually is the change of portfolios to something that people deem to be relatively stable, and the US dollar regardless of the weaknesses we've seen in the previous days, but it still remains the global vehicle currency, and it still remains a safe haven. So we're seeing currencies like the Swiss franc also gaining ground there. That's why we're seeing the Eurozone overall stabilizing and becoming a bit stronger against the Lilangeni because of those geopolitical tensions. But we do remain relatively stronger against the Japanese yen there with some 0.51% gain on today's trades. Thank you,
Well,
Mr.
Sanele, thank you so much. Right on tea time, it's 30 minutes after 2. We've come to the end of our program. That is our economist, Sanele Sibia, just chiming into what the numbers are defining in terms of the markets today. Thank you for staying with us. Have yourselves a good afternoon. Bye-bye.